Hello, everyone. My name is Amin Nouri. I'm a postdoctoral research associate at the Biosystems Engineering and Soil Science Department at the University of Tennessee. First, I would like to appreciate all that contributed to the organization of Milan No-Till Field Day that goes virtual for the first time. It is actually a great example of resilient land grant mission of the UTI. So today I'm going to share with you some yield and yield stability outcomes in different management systems under favorable and unfavorable environmental conditions. This data comes from a long-term continuous cotton experiment managed in the University of Tennessee's West Tennessee Research and Education Center since early 80s. And in our analysis, we include the cotton yield data between 1986 and 2018. So this is a collaborative work among the faculty and staff at the Biosystems Engineering and Soil Science Department and Plant Science Department and USDA ARS. So I'm going to remove this window so that you can see the slides better. So the projections based on the historical climate records foresees an increase in annual temperature, wintertime precipitation, and a substantial decrease in summertime precipitation over the next 4 decades across the United States. Also, the southeastern region is projected to continue facing a decreasing summertime precipitation and increasing temperature. But the major problem is the increasing frequency of intense summer and fall rainfalls that cause serious damage not only to the plants in yield, but also increases the risk of soil erosion that will negatively affect the yield productivity and soil quality in long term. Increasing frequency of dry and hot periods and heavy precipitations, along with the intensive agronomic practices like intensive tillage, monocropping, high reliance on farm chemicals, and the lack of winter covers can further challenge the future sustainability of agricultural production. For example, in this plot, you can see the long-term deviation of the precipitation and temperature data over the growing seasons recorded by a local meteorology station. So this is the long-term deviation of the annual precipitation and temperature from the long-term mean values. And you can see clearly the increasing trend of both the extreme wet years and also the extremely dry years. So with increasing extreme weather conditions, we expect our agroecosystems to develop a soil system that resists structural collapse and erosion. We also expect a rapid recovery after the exposure to the stresses without ongoing the irreversible state of degradation. And the outcome of such a stable and resilient soil system is the lower rate of soil erosion, profitable, stable, and quality yield, low pest and diseases pressure, and also low greenhouse gas emissions and nutrient losses. That all benefits the greater social, economic, and environmental sustainability of agroecosystems. But the question is, what management practices create more stable and resilient agroecosystem? So the long-term controlled experiments are very valuable assets to help us have a better insight into economic and environmental sustainability of management system across different environmental conditions. And they also help us reveal the relationship between the agroecosystem resilience and economic outcome. And they provide potentially more realistic large-scale risk assessment under multiple sources of stresses. In this figure, you can see the experimental layout of our long-term experiments. And in this slide, I'm going to show you the treatments included in this experiment. It's a continuous cotton experiment with rain-fed cropping system. So we get a chance to see the direct impact of precipitation and temperature anomalies on crop yield and other soil properties. We have two levels of tillage system, conventional and no tillage, for nitrogen fertilization rates, and for cover crop management in a annual cotton by cover crop rotation, summing up to 32 treatment combinations. Here you can see the long-term cotton yield under 32 management system. So each of the lines represent one of the management systems. We divided the entire period to the short term, the mid-term, and the long-term phases to see how management effect on yield, both in favorable and unfavorable environmental conditions, change over time. So you can see the clear increasing trend of cutting yield over time. And we believe that it's mainly because of the improvements in cotton genotypes. Um, and the black bars at the bottom are showing the separation between different management system for each singular years. These are the standard deviation values, and you can also see the increasing trend for the standard deviation as well. And it shows that the yield contrast between management systems become more evident over time. So the high yielding management system show their benefit more clearly compared to the low yielding ones. So we have very productive soils in Tennessee, and with over 80% of no-tillage adoption rate for major commodity crops, we have one of the highest no-till adoption rate in the nation. But we have serious challenges. For example, we have high soil erosion potential, especially in upland cotton systems due to the very low residue content and silty soils. And also the non-point source pollution is another problem, and low organic carbon accumulation because of the very high decomposition rate of organic matter. And in spite of the great contribution of no-tillage system to the conservation of soil and water resources, we still have concerns on the productivity of no-tillage systems. And as I explained before, there is a concern on yield stability under increasing unfavorable environmental conditions that we are trying to address in our study. So let's take a look at some results in terms of the tillage effect. You can see the three different phases at X scale and cotton yield in a Y scale. During the first phase or the first 10 years, conventional tillage was the high producing tillage management. But after the first 10 years, in both second and third phases, no tillage was the high yielding tillage system. In terms of the cover crop management, during the first phase, we didn't see any significant benefit of cover crop and cotton yield. But during the second phase, we observed the clear advantage of legume cover crops, especially the hairy vetch. That benefit further increased during the third phase, and hairy vetch and crimson clover, especially hairy vetch, was the highest yielding um, cover crop among all cover crop treatments. In terms of the nitrogen rate effect during the phase one, except for the zero nitrogen application rate that produced significantly lower yield compared to the other treatment levels, uh, we didn't see any significant effect of nitrogen application. But during the second and third phases, we can see um, the effect, the benefit of increasing rate of nitrogen rate on cotton yield. This difference is especially very sensitive compared to the zero nitrogen application. So one may ask why after 20 years of no tillage and cover crops application, including legumes with nitrogen credit, um, why we are still dependent on higher nitrogen rates for greater yield. The answer is because this data is averaged across cover crops, including legumes, non-legumes, and also the no cover crop. So to have, so for more clarification, let's take a look at nitrogen rate interaction with cover crops. Each of the color lines is a cover crop system. For example, the red line is the hairy vetch, the black line is crimson clover, and blue and green lines are winter wheat and no cover crop management. Uh, During the phase one, across the nitrogen rates, we just see the advantage of legume cover crop species maintaining high yield, relatively high yield compared to um, the winter wheat and no cover crop management. But in higher nitrogen rates, 100 kilogram per hectare, the winter wheat is the high yielding uh, cover crop treatment. But during the second and third phases, we can see more or less the same trend. And it's very clear that two legume cover crops maintain high yield, particularly under low nitrogen applications, which is a huge benefit in terms of both keeping yield high and reducing the nitrogen application rates for the environmental safety and economic benefit. And during the third phase, this difference becomes more um, evident, especially for hairy vetch. And as you can see, the hairy vetch under 34 kilogram nitrogen per hectare, both during the second and third phases, is the highest yielding cover crop nitrogen combination. One thing that is very important is the difference in productivity rate between legume cover crops. So you can see a great difference between, especially in long term, between cover crop, between the crimson clover and hairy vetch. And hairy vetch is clearly um, the highest yielding cover crop treatment. And it shows the importance of appropriate selection of most suitable cover crops, even when we are selecting among legumes. So it's very important to select the ones that are more suited to our specific soil and field conditions. And here you can see the stability parameters, the yield stability parameters uh, derived from a regression analysis. So all these 6 plots are sharing the same X and Y axis. In the Y axis, you will see the difference, the yield difference between each singular treatment minus the global mean. And in x-axis, you will see what management system are more productive in favorable environmental condition and which one are more productive under unfavorable environments. So the values greater than 1 are the ones that are more productive in favorable, and the values less than 1 shows the treatments are more productive under unfavorable environments. So the 3 top plots are comparing the tillage systems. During the phase 1, we don't see any significant separation between no tillage and conventional tillage. But during the second phase, our 2 favorite zone, high yielding zones, show that there is a clear differentiation between no tillage or red dots and the conventional tillage. And the red dots, as you can see, or the no tillage system, both produces greater yield compared to conventional tillage in average, and also they tend to produce greater yield under unfavorable environmental condition, which is very important benefits of no tillage that keeps yield high under unfavorable environments. In the third phase, we can see more or less the same behavior or the separation between conventional tillage and no tillage. And in terms of the cover crop effect, at the plots at the bottom, if you look at the phase one, we don't have very clear differentiation between um, the cover crop treatments. But in second phase, the crimson clover and Haiti vetch, especially Haiti vetch, as you see, almost all of the red dots or Haiti vetch are located in high yielding zone. And the similar behavior can also seen in the third phase. But as you can see, these two legume species are more productive in favorable environmental conditions than favorable, than unfavorable. So they are more productive in favorable than unfavorable environmental conditions, in contrast to no tillage system. So some take-home messages would be no tillage is the leading practice to maintain high yield and lowering temporal yield variability after initial phase. Higher N rates increase cotton yield, particularly in near normal and wet years, but also increase temporal yield variabilities across different environmental conditions. Cover crops increase yield after the second phase, so it takes a longer time for cover crops to show their benefits on cutting yield um, than no tillage. But if you want to see the effect of cover crops earlier, the best approach would be combining them with no tillage system that maintain high and stable yield across mid and long-term phases, and more importantly, under lower nitrogen input. With that, I thank you and all contributed to this work. If you need more information about this presentation, please feel free to send me an email or read our latest publication on this data. Thank you very much.